3. Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, good morning. Happy Thursday. Ernesto Vega coming to you live from the Canvas Doral office today. And we are back hosting our weekly session of Ask the Lender. And today's topic, which is a very hot topic right now, is about appraisals. Appraisals. So the gentleman joining me today, which is the intergalactic manager for CMG Home Loans, in a previous galaxy used to be an appraiser. So I said, Ruben, if anybody can answer these crazy appraisal questions that are coming my way, it's gotta be you. And he's like, well, let me dust off my old binder, right? Let me dust off my old binder and let's and hit me. But Ruben says this is being broadcasted in social media and some people watch this later. If you want to do a quick intro for those that have not worked with you or your entire Army or loan officers in Florida, if you can do a quick shameless plug, and then we'll get right on it.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for having me, Ernesto. My name is Ruben Crispino. I'm the regional manager for CMG Home Loans here in South Florida. The topic today is going to be appraisals. I did appraisals from 1989 through about 2009, so about 20 years. So quite a bit of experience. I have not renewed my license, so I'm no longer a licensed appraiser. So this is more of an information session, just so everybody knows. But yeah, the experience is there, and I just want to go through some of the questions you may have, because I know we get a lot of questions, and some of the myths regarding appraisals. Typically, the biggest one we get is obviously the difference between types of appraisals. So I'll let you go ahead and start, and fire away. I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, I love the disclosure. You sounded just like Manny and Michelle. This is not legal advice in any way, shape, or form. But
right.
I'll do my best. All right. So, and thank you for doing this. I know that you're no longer out there practicing, but you did this for a while, so you had your experience. So Ruben, can you walk us through the basic appraisal process, just from the moment that an appraiser gets the order to when the report is submitted? Because some people have a misconception that appraisers take too long, they're doing too many things, they do this on the side. That I know it's a lot of math and equation and responsibility, because the lenders is going based on your piece of paper to lend that money. So could you walk us through, from the moment the order comes in to the appraisal is submitted, what is the actual appraisal process?
Sure. So, obviously nowadays, we have a lot more appraisal options and different types of appraisals than we did back, 20 years, 25 years ago. But if you're make this as simple as possible, and we can just discuss, a single family home, right? Because obviously investment property, duplex, triplex, or even condos are a little different. But to keep it as simple as possible, we'll just talk about a single family home. Request. So the appraisal is going to get a request, and they are entitled or need to know certain information about the home. If it's under contract, they need a copy of that contract. I know a lot of people don't feel like that's important. Oh, the appraiser should tell me what it's worth. I shouldn't tell them what it's under contract for. I've had those comments before. But it's important because that is market data, right? Appraiser's job overall is just to analyze market data. So once the order comes in and they get the appropriate documentation, like the appraisal, if it's a refi, contact the borrower. You borrow on a refi, the listing agent on a purchase, they're going to ask some questions to make sure the information they have is correct. If it's on a refi, for example, it's not listed, they're going to confirm how many bedrooms and baths it is. Just because public records is not always correct, MLS is not always correct. So they should have that conversation prior to going out there regarding the property. It really would save everybody a lot of time. Again, we always talk about it, whether it's on the mortgage side, the real estate side, the appraisal side, any business, really, it's all about that initial conversation with the customer. And once they feel they have the information ready to go, they should start doing the research. So the research should be the longest part of the appraisal, right? I know when appraisers get to the house, I get a lot of comments that, oh, they only spent 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, that's the black and white part, right? The meat and the bones of an appraisal is the research and making sure that you're researching the market in the appropriate way. So they're going to research the area of the property, see what's, taxable as far as square footage. They'll find it on an aerial map to see where it's located. Is it on a canal? Is it back of school? Does it front commercial real estate? Whatever it may be. Um, I think we're getting some background.
Yeah.
But so so they'll do all that. And then once they determine where the property is, the next step is to determine what creates value there. What is it about this property that makes it valuable? Whatever it is, whether it's $1 or $10 million, it doesn't matter. There's something about each property that creates value. It could be its location, it could be its square footage, it could be the fact that it's on the water, it could be the fact that it's multifamily, has good cash flow. There's always one major thing that creates market or creates value for that property. And I think that's the focus. So for example, in my opinion, you have to look at the property location wise, make sure that your market or your comparables, because that's what comes out of the market, are in the same market. Things like school district, things like cities, things like desirability. Also, one of the things that we talk about a lot is the bedroom and bath count, right? It's not just about square footage, right? 4 bedroom, 2 bath house, that's 3,000 square feet, may be more valuable than a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, that's the same 3,000 square feet. Depends on the utilization, right? So a lot of that comes into play, trying to figure out what creates the value for this property, do the research, try to find like comparables, and obviously the closer, most similar comparables would be better. Also the newer ones, right? The newer the better, because they clearly ascertain current market value right now. We all know that, your typical property gets listed for sale. Once it goes under contract, it may take 30 days on average to close. So on a fast moving market, the time frame can be very, very important. When market is more stable, like it's beginning to look like now, we're becoming into a more stable market, then that becomes a little less important, right? The time frame of the sale. But typically we're looking at 6 months back, and then we can go back a year for comparables. And you want to see, again, what is the most important part of my job? Is it finding comparables that are on the water? Is it finding, the market's moving so fast here that I got to find comparables within 2 months? That's the most important thing. And then once that's determined, the comparables are chosen. They are hopefully made an appointment to go out see the property. I like looking at the property first. I used to do that and then look at the comparables. Go to the property. You may have an idea from, for example, if it's in Broward County or Dade County, if you go pull up the property appraiser's office, there is a schematic in there, a little sketch. It's nice to take that with you. You're not going to use it. You're still required to measure the property if necessary. But it's a good way to know, what was there. It's a good starting point to make sure things are legal and permits have been pulled. All this prior to, showing up the property. And then you do your typical inspection, right? I always started on the outside first, measure the property first. It's just much easier to know where the rooms are. You're taking notes, not just of the fact that, 20 feet or 15 feet or 50 feet. You got to take a look around, what kind of windows it has, what kind of roof it has, how close is it to the next house, what kind of view. You're taking pictures of the exterior, if it's got a pool, porch, all that's being measured, okay? And then you typically go inside the property. Once you get there, you may meet a realtor who are usually very friendly and want to offer you comparables.
Usually,
And
is that a disclaimer?
yeah, you're all usually
For
pretty
everybody
friendly.
listening, if you go to an appraisal, please be friendly to the appraiser.
Pretty
Please be
friendly.
friendly to the appraiser. Not the person you want to fight with.
Well, the reality is we should be nice all the time to everybody, right? What's the need? Be nice. But the reality is that most realtors offer some kind of documentation, not always, but appraiser, if they're doing their job, they should have a conversation with the realtor. Sometimes the realtor may know information about either the property or the area that the appraiser is not privileged to at that time. So for example, things like, hey, I just want to let you know that, they just changed the school district here. The house across the street, while across the street, maybe a different school district now. Things like that, the appraiser will eventually be required to find out, but it's much easier if you tell them. Or something like, hey, this property is closing, close this morning. Things that kind of information would help an appraiser. When I was appraising, I always was appreciative of the information we received from the realtor. If the property's got an addition or renovations, maybe a sheet detailing what was renovated, what time, what was added to, it was all done legally, the permits were pulled, maybe it was just recently done, so it doesn't show up in Broward County or Dade County tax report. All that information really helps the appraisal do it right the first time, right? That's what we want. We want to do it right and kind of move on. After the outside's done, they come inside, same thing. They're going to notice where the rooms are at, make sure the floor plan is flowing, right? It's got to be a functional floor plan. You can't have a bedroom behind another bedroom with only access through that other bedroom. That's called a tandem bedroom. Make sure the bedrooms have closets, make sure the condition of the property, what kind of renovation it's had, the kitchen, flooring, the quality of the renovation. And you'll be taking pictures of the inside also. At that point, hopefully say your goodbyes and out the door, and you're looking at comparables. You're taking the same kind of notes, right? Typically, if you're in a community like, for example, Weston or Doral or the Hammocks or something like that, where you're actually in a community that there's a lot of the same model, you can tell when you're taking the picture of the comparable, oh, this is actually the same model as my house, or this is the model next door, or similar, or whatever it may be. So those are what you're looking at when you're taking your comparables, you're taking pictures, noticing the location. What location is better? Is a better location than my subject property, or is it inferior? You're making all those notes as you go and trying to be as incognito as much as you can, taking pictures of the comparables, because people are just, what are you taking pictures of my house for? You get that a lot sometimes, but you try to do it as easy as possible. And then typically once you taken all your pictures, you made all your notes, I would typically make sure that the report gets written that day or the next day, because you tend to forget, right? I mean, mine only works as good as your notes are and your memory is. So typically the report should be put together the next day and sent out. That's basically kind of the process.
Okay, I got two questions in the chat, and then I got a couple other questions for you. One question is, so that's a question for me and for you. I'll let you take it first. So Simone wants to know, South Florida market, it's a fast moving market, right? So if you're gonna take a listing, is it worth spending the money to get an appraisal to determine a realistic value? Does that appraisal carry any weight when the property is sold? Or what's your take on that?
So normally I would say no. It's not usually worth getting appraisal done prior to, the appraisal being ordered with after the property has been purchased. Unless the only reason would be unless you have a need for it, like you really have a unique property, maybe you're not really sure what it could be worth. There may be some, I don't know, additional value in the possibility of it having commercial possibilities, later on. It's got to be something unique. But typically I say no. I mean, it's usually not worth it to get it, because you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into that. Your CMA done correctly should be enough to come up with a list price. And then again, when we're in a normal market, I understand she said that South Florida is a fast moving market, and she's right. But in a normal market, things kind of work themselves out, right? If you do a CMA and you do it correctly and you list it and it's been marketed for a little while, the market kind of works itself out over time. And the appraiser is really there just as a net, right? The appraiser for two reasons, typically, at least on a mortgage transaction, to protect the lender, that the asset value is there, and also to protect the consumer. We have a consumer buying from another part of the country or another part of the world. They may not be aware of certain factors on value, and the appraiser is there to protect them also.
So the next question, actually, there's a comment. Yala says that if you wear red to the appraisal, it always comes in.
This is just a joke, okay? It always work, but more than that, if you always, I always try to use that moment to talk to the pricer about another transaction. Then I learn for another transaction, and I make like a good communication. They feel important. That's super good.
Absolutely. That's absolutely. I don't know about the red part, but
for the ladies,
Oh, the ladies,
it's
okay.
beautiful. We have the best results in appraisals. It's just
Okay.
that.
I am not touching that one with a 10-foot
Let's
pole.
move along.
Let's
So
move along with that
my
one.
next question.
But yeah, you're right. You know, the reality is, you know, we're professionals. If you have an appraiser that you meet, and there are obviously can be a wealth of knowledge of what's going on, especially if you've been in business for a while. It's always good to have somebody you can talk to and talk about another transaction, and get information from. And likewise, you know, I always tried when I was appraising to be friendly with realtors because, you know, I'm talking about a long time ago. We didn't have the technology we have now, so I would have to call realtors. Hey, you know, when is this closing? Did it close? You know, what kind of condition was it in? Was it really renovated or was it kind of renovated? You know, things like that, you know, as an appraiser, yeah, you see the pictures, but, you know, depending on the angle, these photographers are amazing and AI is amazing now. So sometimes the conversation with the realtor comes a long way. And as an appraiser, you do have to confirm that sale by multiple sources. So sometimes that conversation with the realtor will help you confirm a situation with a comparable. Listen, that was an estate sale. Maybe it hasn't shown up as an estate sale, but it was, or maybe it was a pre-foreclosure. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very important for both sides, not just for the realtor, but for the appraiser too. Yeah.
Right. So you touched on something that Alvaro was asking, and I think it's a valid point. And we don't have as much of it as we used to, but we still have, you know, short sales, we still have foreclosures, we still have probates, we still have divorce sales. Does those affect the value in a neighborhood where the values have been steady and all of a sudden there was this one blip on the radar, which usually is the last blip and it is 25% below market? Does that one hinder the value in the rest of the neighborhood, or those can be excluded because you have proof that it was a distressed sale of some sort? And
Yeah, it should not be included. In the situation that you just mentioned, I'll tell you the opposite situation back in 2010 or 2009, when we had a ton of short sales and foreclosure, that was the market. So you would not exclude that. But in today's day, where we have very little foreclosures, very little short sales, you should exclude it. It's like that. You know, your appraisers got to understand that, look, it should be obvious, right? If everything's selling for 300 and you have a sale for 250, why? And if it's obviously was sold by the bank, or again, back to y'all's point, you know, you confirm with the realtor, yeah, this was pre-foreclosure, had a list pending. The appraiser has to know all that on the comparable. You know, they have to really understand not just the condition, property, the size, and that kind of stuff, but the terms, right? We talk a lot about financing terms and concessions. All that has to be included in that. But yeah, so in today's market, I would say in general, yeah, one sale, whether it's high or low, shouldn't really make the market.
Okay, so then the question that everybody has, my appraisal was done and it came in 10% short. What do I do? What are my options?
Well, there is a rebuttal process. That's the word we use, rebuttal. We do a rebuttal on the appraisal. You need to really make sure and redo your homework for your CMA and make sure that you can find valid points where the appraiser made an error. Okay, could it be an error, a technical error? We find those quite a bit. They just made a mistake on their calculations.
Yeah,
they could have made a mistake on square
common
footage.
is they measure, you know,
Right.
it happens wrong, and then
that would be step one. Or they made an error on the what they determined to be the market, right? And again, that goes back to, and most appraisers, you know, standing up for my own profession, they do it. They try to do a good job, and they try to read the market. And you can't have one appraiser just appraise North Gables, right? That appraiser, in order to stay in business, do North Gables, South Gables, pretty much at least Dade County. Most appraisers do multiple counties, right? So if you have a situation, for example, I always talk about my neighborhood where I live. If you pull up the area, you're gonna have multiple homes, and you have, you know, a major thoroughfare, which is, you know, US 1. And if you're on one side of US 1 or the other side of US 1, the value really changes. I go back to school districts. So, you know, those are things you need to look at. Also, maybe they missed a comparable. They just missed it. Or there was, again, information regarding to a sale that they should not have used. We've talked about that before. You know, everybody on most listings indicate the property great condition, but, you know, was it renovated 15 years ago? Or was it renovated, you know, 2 years ago? Does it, you know, it matters. It matters, the information. We do rebuttals when necessary. Again, but we have to do the upfront homework, not just, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or this girl doesn't know what she's doing. We have to have, you know, serious to really combat or rebut the appraisal.
So one of the ones that comes up a lot is, but they didn't use this comparable, right? And this comparable, what that was not closed when the property went under contract. So it closed after the property was under contract. Can that comparable be used?
So if the effective date of the appraisal is not, that's subjective, but it's typically the date that they go there to inspect the property. Okay. If the property has not closed as of, no, they can't use it. Now they can use it as a pending sale to help determine the market value, but it's not going to be considered one of the closed sales. Again, if it's one sale should not make a market. We've heard that say many times, one way or the other, whether it's high or low. Remember, you got both aspects. You can't have it both ways, you know. However, if we go back to the point that was brought up earlier about a fast moving market, if it is the newest sale and it clearly shows the market's really moving and the trend shows that way, then yes, then I would suggest that, okay, look, the market's moving really fast. The two most recent closed sales show that, and now this one shows that even more. Then that would be market data to possibly make a time adjustment on the appraisal. So, you know, like the answer to everything in real estate is depends on the situation.
So then the other question that we get a lot is, you know, there's two recent sales that are being used that are within my same subdivision, but within a mile, I have another sale. I have three more sales that gives me a better value. Are they going to stick to the homes in that subdivision? Like, for example, I said the landings in Mary Knoll. You got good comp, you got a sale in Mary Knoll, and you got three sales in the landings that give you a higher price.
Right.
But the ones in Mary Knoll give you a lower. And if you don't know what Mary Knoll and the landing things, it's okay. It means that me and Ruben spend too much time reading tax rolls.
Yeah, so that's actually a great, that's kind of where I live. So yeah, there's a big difference in value between the landings and Mary Knoll. Yeah, you got to use the most similar. That's the whole word comparable, comparable, una propiedad comparable, a comparable property. They're not comparable, the landings in Mary Knoll. So you're not going to go out of your way to bring in a comparable just because you want a better value. I mean, this is not about a better value or a higher value. It's the word is market value. Remember, we're looking at this, the value to be what most people will pay for a property, right? Not one person pays for the property. So for example, if you have a listing or you're buying a property next door to your mother-in-law's house and she babysits for you, it's worth a lot more for you than me, right? Or if you're buying the property next to your mother-in-law and you can't stand her, probably worth less for you than for me, right? So there's a lot of factors. And when appraisers are looking at market value, people would react and pay for that property, not just one person.
Okay, so then we got to stick within the same subdivision. We got to stick to properties that are closed before we went under contract, right? Do you recommend?
No, before the effective date, not the
Before the
contract,
effective
before the
date.
effective.
So do you recommend that realtors bring a list of all upgrades or added features?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Maybe
that's
the appraiser is not going to notice that all the details, and is that something you recommend?
absolutely. I mean, you can take it. I mean, some appraisers, you know, most appraisers will take it and say thank you, whether they use it or not doesn't matter. But it does help them, you know, remember if they're doing multiple appraisals in one day, like everybody else, you know, they tend to forget or they miss something detail wise, you know. So I would give them as much information as you can. I mean, I wouldn't bring them a binder, but you know, because it's a little much. But you know, of what the renovations were, when they were done, the comparable sales, especially if you feel that something new or unique is about the property. Definitely, you know, it couldn't hurt. You're not influencing the appraiser by giving them this. This is just you're giving them market data. The appraiser still required to do their own research and make sure and confirm also what you give them. So I would definitely be as nice as you can and be as helpful as you can with the appraiser. Yeah.
Okay. Running out of time, but then I have a question that came up a couple of times, and it made buyers very concerned. And is this new rise on desktop appraisals or virtual appraisals? Because some buyers are like, you know, I don't want to proceed because they how can a computer tell me what the house is worth? They never saw the house, they never measured the house. And I'm like, listen, with today's technology, they can read your license plate. So trust me, there's no need to, but some buyers have reached out concerned they don't trust the validation because it was a virtual validation or AI validation. And I know that you keep in touch with a lot of the appraisal, the national appraisal companies, so you're very informed. Is are those reliable?
I think it's not just whether they're reliable or not. What's happening more and more, we're just not doing appraisals. Okay. Remember, the appraisal is done in our case, as a mortgage company, which is typically who orders the appraisal, right? We are looking for our collateral, right? That's what we care about. And we're also looking about the overall risk of the loan. So we're getting more and more, excuse me, appraisal waivers. So there's no valuation at all. There's not needed. Somebody's buying a $500,000 house and they're putting, $400,000 house. I'm doing a $100,000 mortgage. I don't really need an appraisal. What do I care as a lender? Now, I'm not going to step on Michelle or Manny's shoes here, or yours as a broker, but I'm assuming they're still willing or able to order their own appraisal. We're not charging them if there's no appraisal, so they might as well do their own appraisal if they're concerned, and they can pay and they can choose whoever they want and they can make the decision that way. But from our perspective, we're doing it to validate or confirm or the value of our collateral that we're taking on a loan. It's also a requirement from, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, VA, whatever it may be. So that's they're always able to order their own appraisal on their own for their peace of mind. But like I said, we're doing more and more. We're getting a lot more and more appraisal waivers on our loans.
So you're seeing that as the lenders feeling comfortable enough with the buyer, right? The buyer, they feel comfortable enough with the buyer and the buyer's finances that so the house is no longer. I mean, you're changing the game. You're saying that the person has more value than the asset. You trust the person more than the asset. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, Ernesto, you remember what happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, and we have a lot of data that came out of that. And after the mortgage recession, because that's what it was, the data that came out had nothing to do with values. People did not go into foreclosure based on the value or equity of the home. The foreclosures at the end of the day, if person was able to cash flow the property or pay for it, better said, with income, it was all about income. And that's what came out of it. And we're still kind of focused on that. Income is the most important part of a transaction that we're doing, because we'll do a loan at 97% LTV, right? We will. So the reality is we're looking at, at the end of the day, what came out of that great recession, that it was really all about the borrower. Because if they could afford to keep the property and not let it go into short sale or foreclosure, they kept it. And probably did pretty well. It's probably a good idea to keep it, right, over the long term. But so it's really a risk factor. It's, we lend on more and more based on these, like you said, automated AI stuff that are doing the evaluations for us. And, it's good enough. It's good enough to take a risk on my example. Somebody's got an 850 credit score. They're putting $300,000 down on a $500,000 house. What kind of risk do I have as a lender?
Okay. Ruben, thank you so much. I know that, this is a topic that is very dear to your heart because, you did this for many, many years, walked the hot streets of Miami for many years. And every time that, a campus agent has had an issue, you always jump in and try to guide them with, on the way to go. So we didn't talk mortgages today, but I know that is what you and your team does right now. In closing, where I know that 30 applications we're chatting with are up 33% week per week. So those are the buyers that have been sitting with their arms crossed for the past 2 years are now standing up. Are you seeing that uptick on buyers out there?
Yeah, we were pretty busy. I mean, we had a company-wide, and again, we're one of the bigger companies in the country in all 50 states. Company-wide, we had probably our best application month in March in a long, long time. So yeah, people are out there buying. I mean, I think it's a combination of people getting comfortable or used to the rates, I guess, where they are. I'm trying to tell everybody, we're not economists. You shouldn't be one either. You're a realtor, sell people what they want. We'll find a program for them.
We provide shelter.
That's right. Right. So, the market will do what the market does. We have very little control over that. But in the meantime, life goes on and people need to, upsize, downsize, move to a different part of the country, whatever it may be. So we're staying pretty busy, which is great, thank God. But I think a lot of it has to do with the increase in inventory. Yeah, I think we're gonna have a good year. Hopefully the rates do go in our direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, I know. Last thing I want to say is Ruben, like me, believes that the increase in inventory that people are panicking about is a blessing. The increase in inventory is a blessing because it's making deals happen and is making buyers rushed out there. That is it for me. Thank you everybody that joined us today. I hope all your appraisal questions were answered. If they weren't, Ruben, where can they get a hold of you?
Well, my cell phone's always my best way to get a hold of me. You can text me or call me. I'm really, really good. You can ask anybody. I always call you back if I can't answer. Cell phone number is 954-661-2790.
Bye, everybody. Stay productive.
Bye. Have a good week.